know what's scarier? The fact that everyone in this kingdom wants to run a sword through my heart. Or that sometimes I just want to let them.
The first time I watched Nimona was right around the time it first came out on Netflix, and I didn't go into it planning to make a review of it, I was just watching it because I wanted to. Turns out you're allowed to just watch a movie without giving yourself homework. Who knew? But then, as I was watching it, one thought crept up more and more. I wish I was making a video about it. Trouble is, I was already about halfway through working on a different video and didn't have time to start a new one from scratch. So I went on my merry way, thinking I'd maybe talk about it sometime in the future. In the meantime, Nimona received critical acclaim, got an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature. I doubt it'll win given the competition, but it was either that or Wish, and we've already got one mediocre Disney film taking up a slot.
I like the word moist, okay?
But then something really unusual happened. On the 19th of February 2024, Netflix just out of nowhere released the movie on YouTube. For free, in its entirety. Apparently they're trying to earn some brownie points with the Academy.
Something, 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 we win.
That is honestly pretty awesome. I mean, by the time this video comes out, it'll be gone, but hey, more people having access to a film this good is never a bad thing. So, in light of the occasion, I thought I'd check it out again and see how it holds up. And if you enjoyed this video, then consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is in the description below. For just $1.50 a month, you'll get access to all my videos before they get released on YouTube. The movie is set in a sci-fi medieval kingdom called... Hold on. Okay, I thought I just forgot, but apparently it doesn't have a name. Well, anyway, for 1,000 years, the kingdom has been walled off from the outside world after a legendary warrior named Glorith protected it from supernatural creatures who seek to cause it harm.
Go back to the shadows from whence you came!
Or so we're told. Throughout the ages, there's been an institute of knights of noble birth that have acted as a defense against potential monster attacks. The film follows Ballister Boldheart, a citizen of the kingdom about to become a knight, the first commoner ever to do so. But that all changes during his knighting ceremony with the Queen. Ballister's weapon inexplicably goes off, killing her. Now labeled as a traitor and on the run from the law, Ballister has to figure out who tampered with his weapon and prove his innocence. And along the way is the only one willing to help him, someone just as hated by the kingdom as him, a supernatural shapeshifter named Nimona.
He's a murderer! He's a monster!
He's perfect.
Now, I think it makes sense that the first thing we talk about is the first thing that you've likely taken note of, the art direction. The art style of this film has a fairly unique look as far as CGI animated movies go. It's not going for semi-realism like you might see from Pixar, but it's also not exactly going for the pseudo 2D look that Into the Spider-Verse popularized. It's sort of a middle ground, and the closest thing I can compare it to would be The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. And it's an art style that's kind of garnered some slightly divided opinions. While I've personally never seen anyone say that the movie looks bad, there are complaints that it looks kind of cheap. I agree that it can look occasionally kind of flat, particularly the background characters and extras, but for the most part, the film uses that simplicity to its advantage. The style uses a lot of solid blocks of contrasting color that create a very bold and striking look, without an excessive amount of texture or detail to busy up the image. For example, if you look at the lighting, there often isn't really a transition between color tones. There's just a hard line where a shaded area stops and a lit area begins. And while I wouldn't say it's on the same level as some other stylized animation like Spider-Verse or other animated films like it, it still makes all the right choices with what it's working with, to the point where I'd honestly say it still looks great. It's also helped by the fact that even at a more basic level, the animation itself conveys a lot of characterization. The characters have really expressive facial animation, and the way they move tells us a lot about them. Nimona, for example, is portrayed as being very chaotic and uncontrollable, which is demonstrated by a lot of scenes where she's by far the most active thing on screen. And that creates a good juxtaposition with Ballister, who's comparatively more composed and less impulsive, so his movements tend to be a lot more restrained. And that good characterization isn't just limited to the animation, it's also present in the writing. Ballister, for example, is a character who just has the whole world against him. Right at the beginning of the movie, the idea of a commoner becoming a knight is a controversial one for a kingdom which, as far as they know, has only survived by sticking to the traditions laid out by Glorith.
Will the kingdom accept this knight, who might not? be right.
But one of the few people who sees the potential in him is the Queen herself, to the point where she's willing to stand up for him, showing the kingdom that it opens doors for everyone, and that if one person who came from nothing can amount to one of the most prestigious positions in the kingdom, the same can be said for anyone else. But just when it seems like things are looking up for Ballister,
Murderer.
now Ballister's chances of being accepted are lower than ever. Everyone thinks he's committed treason, one of the few people that would vouch for him is dead, and the only other one who's tasked with capturing him, that person being the champion of the Knights, Ambrosius. Ambrosius is one of the major voices of encouragement to Ballister, and is initially introduced as being his closest friend.
You were better and worked harder than all of us.
But it doesn't take long for it to become apparent that there's a little more to it than that. Throughout the movie, it's implied that Ballister and Ambrosius are actually a gay couple, something that doesn't get explicitly confirmed until the very end of the movie. Ordinarily, there would be a part of me that thinks, come on, we've been teasing prominently gay characters in family-oriented media for years now. Is it really so much to ask that we just let a gay couple be a gay couple already? But in the case of Nimona, I think it actually works. For one thing, even right from Ballister and Ambrosius's first scene together, the signs of their relationship are already there, and throughout the story they heavily imply it with only the thinnest layer of ambiguity.
I've lost everything. The man I love, my best friend.
From that alone, you might think, well, they're still shying away from it. But there's a little more to it than that. Throughout the story, one of the main sources of drama is the fact that Ballister is being hunted by Ambrosius. Naturally, this creates a rift between the two as Ballister is hurt that Ambrosius won't believe that he's innocent, and Ambrosius feeling compelled to do his job even though it means destroying his relationship.
What? You're gonna kill me now too?
You believe that? Then you never knew me at all.
Whether you catch on to the gay hints or not, you still feel bad that these two people who are close in one way or another are being torn apart. And if you do catch on, the fact that it's mostly only implied helps to drive that conflict home. The reason why the romance between them isn't on full display for the audience is because in universe, these characters aren't allowed to have it that way. And the fact that the audience has to pick up on it for themselves means that throughout the movie, as we're hoping they get back together, we're also in suspense wondering if the movie is going to go all the way. So when they finally kiss at the end of the movie, meant to show that things eventually worked out between them, the fact that the movie waited until that point to confirm that they are indeed a couple makes that moment all the more cathartic and all the more impactful. Admittedly, this is coming from a straight guy, so take it with a grain of salt. Still, even if my analysis of gay themes isn't as well thought out as I hope it is, at least it isn't plagiarized. But that's only one part of Ballister as a character. There's also his partnership with Nimona. These two are interesting together because they're both in a very similar situation with them both being labeled as villains, but their attitude towards it are completely different. Ballister, while he's always been somewhat looked down upon, has always had a little bit of hope that things would get better for him. Now that public opinion on him has gone from skepticism to outright hatred, he's trying desperately to prove his innocence and get his life back on track. Nimona, on the other hand, is what this society would call a monster. The position that Ballister all of a sudden finds himself in, to her, is all she's ever known. So instead of trying to prove that she's better than that, all she can think to do is play the part.
Start talking.
He wants blood.
Blood?
Your blood.
I don't want blood.
Buckets of blood.
At first, this results in some really strong comedic moments between the two. Ballister is a wanted man trying to keep a low profile, and the only person he can look to for help is someone who's eager to take the most loud and destructive approach possible. It's a style of comedy that really gets helped out by the speed that the jokes keep coming, emphasizing Ballister's panic as he frantically tries to keep things under control, and also by the performances of the cast. Nimona is voiced by Chloe Grace Moretz, who plays the role with such an energetic and happy-go-lucky vibe that even when you don't agree with Nimona, she still has so much enthusiasm and charisma that she's still really likable in a darkly comedic kind of way.
Whoa, yeah! Sick arm! Did it bleed a lot? What? Did they let you keep the old one?
No.
I think it might actually be my favorite performance from her. But that's not to discount Riz Ahmed as Ballister. Compared to Moretz, I'm not as familiar with his work. My first time watching, the only other role of his I could think of off the top of my head was Bodhi Rook from Rogue One. And if you wanted my take on that character, here's a clip from my review of that film. And while Jen on her own is a somewhat interesting character, the people who raised her and made her who she is aren't so lucky. The first of which being Galen, who... Wait. Shit, I forgot there's another member of the Rogue One team, isn't there? I didn't dislike Riz Ahmed, I had just never seen him in a role that left a strong impression, which is more the fault of the material rather than him as an actor, but what can you do? But then I watched Nimona and I realized, especially in the comedic scenes, this guy is really talented.
I'm evil and I hate everybody! And I think babies are ugly!
And on top of having some really funny moments, their partnership develops really well into some good character drama. For Ballister, this is the first time he's ever actually met a magical creature, and by extension, the first time he's ever seen one in a context outside of propaganda.
Back to the shadows and hey!
And it's through interacting with her that he realizes that she's not inherently evil. She doesn't use her powers purely to be malicious, she does it because, put simply, it's a part of her. A part of her that she could technically go without, but at the cost of actually being herself.
You know, like that second right before you sneeze? That's close to it.
This ends up being a great showcase for how Ballister and Nimona are similar in a way, but still different. The fact that Nimona has been ostracized all her life just because she is who she is something Ballister can relate to the point where he actually starts to like her. But at the same time, he's also spent his life in a society that sees her as a freak and even trained to serve an organization meant to preserve the status quo against her. As a result, his allegiance isn't entirely with her, and he still has his own prejudices for what is normal even if he claims that he doesn't.
I just think it'd be easier if you were a girl.
Easier for who?
For you. A lot of people aren't as accepting as me.
And that eventually turns into a sticking point between them where no matter how close they become to each other, Ballister just can't fully admit that he and everything he believes in has directly hurt Nimona, forcing her to admit to both him and herself just how unhappy she actually is.
They grew up believing that they can be a hero if they drive a sword into the heart of anything different.
But if there's one part of the kingdom that has done the most damage in that regard, it's the director of the Institute of Knights. It's revealed fairly early on that she's the one who framed Ballister because she thought allowing a commoner to become a knight was setting a dangerous precedent.
Glorith did whatever it took to keep the monsters out. And so will I.
Throughout the story, the director persistently claims that everything she does is to keep the kingdom safe. But the further along you go in the movie and the more drastic measures she takes, it becomes increasingly evident that that's not really true. For starters, she was told by the Queen that Ballister would become a knight.
I begged the Queen not to question the word of Glorith.
But unable to accept the fact that someone from a lower class was approaching her status, she responded by murdering the leader of an entire kingdom and ruining the life of a man who did nothing wrong. Ballister and Nimona managed to record her admitting it and leak it to the kingdom.
I framed Ballister. I killed the Queen.
And once her crimes have been exposed, she responds by digging deeper into the lie she's created.
That is not me in the recording.
That's a lie.
We are under attack by something that can take any form. Your spouse, your child, your best friend.
Now, not only is she harming individual people, she's actively encouraging an entire civilization to distrust everyone around them, all to continue shunning one person who, once again, did nothing wrong. At this point, the backlash against Nimona has reached its peak because of the director and the people believing her. Even Ballister, who was starting to become her friend.
Because you're not a sidekick. You're a...
What? I'm a what?
You know what you are.
And Nimona, feeling like she has no other option, falls deeper into their perception of her as a monster than she ever has before. The director, trying to kill Nimona once and for all, elects to launch a laser cannon into the area of the city where Nimona is, even though she knows Nimona won't be the only casualty.
Innocent people will die.
And so will the monster.
The further along the story goes, and the more desperate the director gets, the more obvious it becomes what her true motivation is. Despite what she claims, this was never about protecting her kingdom. You don't continuously do this type of serious harm to something in order to protect it. This was about keeping things the way they are, keeping her and her own class of people at the top of the food chain, and making sure anyone she saw as beneath her stayed in their place, by any means necessary. But with that in mind, one question still remains. How did this all start? I mean, we heard that a warrior named Glorith apparently saved the land from an evil monster years and years ago, but what's the actual story there? Well, all that gets explained when we delve into Nimona's backstory. We learn through this really well done sequence with almost no dialogue that Nimona has been around for centuries, but no matter what form she took, she never found anything or anyone who would accept her. That is, until she met a little girl, someone who immediately took a liking to her. They spent time together, becoming friends, until eventually Nimona showed her what she can do. The little girl was initially surprised by this, but understood that she had no reason to be afraid of Nimona, so she accepted it. That is, until the rest of the little girl's village found out. And without any provocation or any signs of any actual threat from Nimona, they assumed she was dangerous and started attacking her in a scene which is genuinely quite difficult to watch, poking and prodding at her, waving torches at her, and trying to kill her in the most blunt and painful way possible. In her time of need, Nimona looked to her friend for help.
Glorith?
But pressure from those around her made Glorith take a stance that set everything in motion from that day forward.
Go back to the shadows from whence you came.
And there you have it, the words that have served as an inspiration for the kingdom for 1,000 years. The words that acted as the unbreakable rule of what is good and what is evil. And it wasn't born from bravery or righteousness or a need to make the world a better place. It was born out of fear. Fear of anything different. Fear of allowing anything to change or grow or, God forbid, be given a chance. And all those years later, Nimona has finally lost all hope that anyone will ever accept her. Especially after someone almost did but seemingly couldn't. And she attempts to kill herself. I have to take a moment here to talk about how big a deal this scene is. It's extremely uncommon that a movie aimed at a family-oriented audience would tackle this kind of subject matter. The closest I can think of would be the furnace scene from Toy Story 3, where the characters accept what seems like the inevitability of their deaths and take comfort in the fact that at least they're together for what they think are their final moments. But this is different. This isn't a scene where a character thinks they've lost. This is a scene where a character is actively deciding that they can't bear to go on. Some pretty heavy subject matter for any movie, let alone one with a target audience like this one. And it's depicted by Nimona attempting to impale herself on the blade of a Glorith statue in front of the Institute's headquarters, symbolizing the Institute's ideology of conquering her and everything like her. For the record, I'm not saying that this scene is better than the furnace scene, I'm just saying that, conceptually, this movie is for an early 2020s audience what Toy Story 3 was for an early 2010s audience. But finally, just when Nimona is about to end it, she's stopped by one thing. One tiny thing which seems like it would be insignificant compared to the centuries of hate and fear all around her, but is nevertheless exactly what she's needed all this time. A friend.
I see you, Nimona. And you're not alone.
And even at her absolute lowest point, Nimona is able to take comfort in that little bit of kindness and calm down. And for the first time, the kingdom is able to see her for who she really is. A sad, scared little girl who just wants to be loved.
Fire the cannons. Kill it.
What if we've always been wrong?
Nimona is a movie that can speak to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds. Whether you're someone who feels nobody understands or accepts you, you know someone who doesn't feel understood or accepted, or even if you're just vaguely aware that people like that exist and can sympathize. This movie is here to show you that you're not alone and you do have friends out there for you. I've mostly tried to avoid making explicit parallels to real-world issues throughout this video. There are plenty of parallels that I could make and the movie clearly wants you to make. I did this because I'm not an expert in what other people are going through, and I didn't want to speak on behalf of people who deserve someone more knowledgeable than me and didn't want to risk saying something that could potentially do more harm than good. But with that in mind, there is one admittedly small thing that I'd still like to do. At time of writing, this movie is still publicly available on YouTube, but by the time this video goes up, it'll be gone. One fun thing that's come from it being available like this is that I've been able to look at the comment section and see perspectives from other people who have watched it. Problem is, once the movie gets taken down from YouTube, so will those comments. So I'd like to conclude this video by reading some of them. To me, one of the biggest details about this movie is that Ballister saved Nimona from herself at the end. He didn't save her from some big bad, he stopped her from ending her own life. In 2015, I was in a bookstore with my dad. He came up to me and handed me a book, saying, "This looks like something you'd like." I obsessively reread the book for years afterwards. I followed the artist's Tumblr and Twitter as best I could, since I wasn't allowed social media, until I secretly booted up a blog, beelining straight to his follow button. In 2023, I sat on my couch and cried like I've never cried before when Ballister and Ambrosius, after years of "someone I love is in danger" and fan art and subtext and extra art in the back of the book, kissed. A month ago, when I explained what the comic means for me to my dad, I started with, "So the main character loves chaos?" He laughed and said, "That sounds just like you." Yeah, Dad, it does. Thank you, Nimona. I got bullied a bit in school. So all my life I dreamt of a gay male hero who understood me. A simple dream, but pure in worth. This movie made me cry tears of joy. It was like getting that Christmas present you really wanted as a kid. Thank you, Netflix and the author, for this partnership. As an outcast myself, I really appreciate this. This movie is one for all the misfits and misunderstood. Amazing. The ability of humans to accept those who appear different than the rest of us, or that we've labeled them different just because they had some originality. What a great emotional message that we should accept our differences. Our Nimona. Thank you, Netflix. Just finished up this movie and it made me cry. I'm a trans guy in a very unaccepting part of the USA, and I resonated so much with Nimona's story and want for acceptance. This story was told amazingly and is a great example of how people are just people and everyone can be good. It made me feel a whole lot better about myself and made me realize I've got friends like Ballister too. This movie made me feel so freaking seen. I always struggled to define myself as anything, but when I watched this movie, I finally found the words when she kept saying, "I'm Nimona."